God of all creation, people, faces, and hearts, we thank you for Mary Frances Shuler Johnson. Thank you for the many years, 75, 95 plus, that Mary Frances' face and heart and life has been a part and a blessing of this part of your creation. We gather to thank you for the many and different ways she has gifted us. We gather to comfort one another for the loss of her physical presence. But we gather to celebrate that we have many and deep memories, that we have her spirit continuing to nurture and to prod us. We celebrate that we have your inspiration to encourage us onward in your creative work and life in the world. We thank you in Mary Frances' memory and in Jesus' name. Amen.
I'll first be reading from Lamentations, chapter 3, verses 22 through 26. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, saith my soul. Therefore will I hope in him. The Lord is good unto them that wait for him, to the soul that seeketh him. It is good that a man should both hope and quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. And then the second reading comes from Psalm 121. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. Amen.
Please stand as you are able as we sing together hymn number 561, It Is Well With My Soul.
It is well have been asked to read a couple of scriptures from the New Testament. But before I do, I would ask that you all indulge me for just a couple of minutes to talk to the family. You're welcome to listen in if you would like. Journey, David, and Hope, and Paul, your family and my family have been together since before any of us were born. I went back and looked in my genealogy a little bit, and your father has known 6 generations of my family, from my great-grandparent down to my grandsons. Your mother knew 5 generations of my family. I think we would be hard-pressed to find anybody that has known anybody that long. They were in each other's weddings. My parents were married in 52, and I think Jack and Mary Frances were married in 53, if I'm not mistaken, before I was born, but they were in the weddings. Your mother held such a deep place in my heart. I lost my brother in 2010, my father in 2014, my mother in 2016. There were so many letters that came from your mother to me after those 3 events that touched my heart. She loved all of them. I loved coming and visiting your dad and your mom when they were in their house together, and then visiting your mom after your dad left. And the funny thing about that is every time I would come, I would ask, "How are you all doing?" They would give me some canned answer. And then all of a sudden she would start listing off the people in my family, my sister-in-law, my sister, my kids, my grandkids, my sister's kids. She knew them all by name. She knew what they were doing, and she was just wanting to know how they were getting along. It really meant a lot to me that she had that much faith in them. And then me, I came to seminary later in life. And those letters that a lot of us received from time to time, those letters kept coming to me, encouraging me along the way. They meant a great deal to me. Today, we all come to share in your grief. We all come to share in your heartbreak. But we also come today to celebrate that love, that compassion, that joy, and that kindness that was your mother. I know for myself, I am truly, truly blessed, as I know all of you all are. Now for those readings. Our first reading is from the Gospel of John. It's that familiar verses that we all know at the beginning of the at the beginning of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. And then from Paul's letters to the Romans, Romans 8:31 through 35 and 37 through 39. What shall we then say to these things? If God be for us, who can be against us? He that spared not his own son, but delivered him up for all of us, how shall he not with him also freely give us these things? Who shall lay anything to charge to God's elect? It is God that judges. Who is he that condemns? It is Christ that died, yea, rather that is risen again, who is even at the right hand of God, who also makes intercessions for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen.
Morning has broken.
From the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 5, verses 1 through 16. And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain. And when he sat, his disciples came unto him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out, and to be trodden under foot of men. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works, and glorify your Father which is in heaven. And further from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 7, verses 7 through 14. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened. Or what man is there of you whom, if his son asks for bread, will he give him a stone? Or if he ask a fish, will he give him a serpent? If ye then, being evil, know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask him? Therefore, all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Enter ye in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. Because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way, which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. It's hard to talk about Mary Frances without talking about Jack. Even as we planned this service, the two of them were so tightly knit together that you just couldn't do it. The scriptures today are the same scriptures that Jack selected for his service. They do mean slightly different things when we read them, thinking about Mary Frances, about her humble way. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Mary Frances put others ahead of herself so often in her life. Blessed are you when you are the light shining on a hill. If you ever received one of Mary Frances's, she calls them cards. But if you ever received one, you know it is a letter. And you knew what that light meant. Seek, and you shall find. Mary Frances was always seeking opportunities to help others, to guide others, and she found them. You can see just by looking around this place what she meant, what her love and light were for so many that are gathered here. Her light shone in such a way as the wife of a Disciples of Christ minister that we have, I can count at least 5 Disciples of Christ congregations represented here in this room, and maybe more. Her light was a city on a hill, shining so that others might see. But also, if you knew Mary Frances, you knew that she would provide a way. She selected many of the things that are in this service, including writing down her own memories. I will share them here with you in her words. And so if I use someone's name and it's not your preferred name, it's what she probably would have called you. Mary Frances says, "We come together in her church sanctuary home for over 50 years to say goodbye to Mary Frances Shuler Johnson, who helped her husband Jack Johnson in founding this beloved place in 1968. She and Jack, with their 4 children, Mark, David, Ann, and Paul. She became the principal at Evington Elementary that year before it was closed during integration. The following 26 years, she taught first grade and kindergarten at New London Academy with half of the Evington students who came when the Evington school closed. She enjoyed 25 years of retirement. She wrote this a couple years ago, so I guess we need to update that to 28 years of retirement. And homemaking and active participation in the church from day one, a hot July 3rd day, with wonderful neighbors like the Rudy Stinnett and Joe Palmer families, and also the Jack Taylor family next door and the David Sinclair family. She went by the name Mary Frances and her family of 6 children, born to Fred and Alma Shuler of Elkton, Virginia, and active members at First Christian Church in Shenandoah, Virginia. She was born on Sunday afternoon, August 12, 1928, and has been active in church all her life until the last 10 years, when she was slowed down by 2 knee surgeries and a broken femur. But she kept up with church through a card ministry. And I'll just say an aside here, I don't think I had been here, not even physically here. I hadn't been the virtual interim minister here for a week when I received a multi-page letter from Mary Frances, sharing her prayers for me, her care for me, and her hopes for me here. And I am deeply grateful for the many letters I received from her over the last several years. Through a card ministry and a love of phone calls checking on church members, especially the older members. She ceased driving 6 years ago and stayed close to home and enjoyed her home filled with many family photos and scrapbooks of many events. She took pride in washing and ironing Jack's white shirts. I want to pause there for just a second. She took pride in such a humble task. So much pride that she wanted this part included in her memories. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. He never had to send a shirt out to the laundry. She also fixed Sunday lunch before going to Sunday school and church, and I'm sure some of her children will talk about those meals here in a few moments. Mary represented her church at Purdue University 4 times with the Christian Women's Fellowship, accompanied by Violet Hudnall and Martha Patterson from TCC 2 of those times. In the early days of TCC, she helped with the nursery with Willa Durbin and Mary Moore. Bill talked about how their families had been tied together, but Mary Frances and Jack's lives in many ways mirrored his parents. Jack's mother had been a school teacher with her minister husband, and so Jack gave his full time to the church as his father had in Bluefield, West Virginia. Both Mary and Jack also gave time to rearing their children who were fond of church. Now let's hear from her children. Journey.
Our family's story starts something like this. During the summer of 1953, a young minister from Richlands, Virginia, was taking graduate education classes at the University of Virginia. On Friday, July 3rd, he attended a YMCA dance hosted by the University of Virginia Campus YMCA. Across the room, he saw this beautiful young school teacher from Shenandoah, Virginia, who was also taking graduate classes. He asked his good friend, Raymond Oliver, Bill's father, who she was, and he told him her name is Mary Frances Shuler. The young minister wrote a handwritten note to ask her to meet him for breakfast when she returned to school after going home to be with her family for the 4th of July weekend. She met him for breakfast on Monday, July 6th, and as they say, the rest is history. It was virtually love at first sight. Less than 5 months later, they were married on November 27th, a cold, snowy Friday afternoon, the day after Thanksgiving, at First Christian Church in Shenandoah. Mary Frances Shuler and Jack Johnson were married for over 65 years. Their love for each other was obvious to all. They never wavered from their commitment to love each other through good and bad times. As they raised the four of us and served churches in Richlands, Norfolk, Roanoke, and Lynchburg. My mother loved telling the story of how she and Dad met. One of her treasures was the note that my father wrote that she kept until her death. Mom was a faithful wife, an exceptional mother, loving sister, dedicated teacher, a great conversationalist, and the hardest worker I've ever known. On behalf of our family, I would like to say thank you to everyone who's here today. It means so much to see so many family and friends. Thank you for being here. It's also great to be back at Timberlake Christian Church. A lot of fond memories during my teens and 20s, and as I was seeing some of the older members that have been here, it just, my brother Dave and I played a lot of softball in that field behind here. I'm sure he and I were not the best behaved kids also at some moments of time, but it is good to be here. Mom's accomplishments were many, and you begin to get a little taste on what Ben and Bill said, but she was so humble that you had to pull it out of her. I still marvel that my mom, at the age of 15, graduated from Shenandoah County High School, and she was the valedictorian of her class. She was also the first runner-up of Miss Shenandoah. And she would remind us she excelled at, well, she didn't talk about her excelling at school, but she did talk to us about the chores she had to do on her family's farm. So she combined doing well in school and doing her chores. And then at age 19, she graduated from Madison College and began her teaching career as a home economics teacher. Later, she would teach first grade and kindergarten, and as you heard Ben, she especially enjoyed her 26 years at New London Academy just down the road. Mom was a great conversationalist who loved learning about you, and I think as you begin to hear, she preferred asking you questions and learning about your family and your interests and what was going on in your life rather than talking about herself. She loved being a teacher and getting to know her students and their families. As already been mentioned several times, she was a prolific writer of cards and letters and was exceptional at remembering people's names, birthdays, and anniversaries. I'm sure many of you in this room got a card, an anniversary note, a birthday card. She was phenomenal. And if you wanted to make my mom happy, all you needed to do was to send her a card or write her a note. I still remember when we were celebrating Mom's 60th anniversary at Red Lobster, which was Mom's favorite restaurant. And Mom began talking to the manager and started asking him questions about each of his 5 children by name. I'm going, how does she remember the Red Lobster manager's 5 kids' names? And she went through kid by kid by kid because her memory recall was extraordinary. Mom's work ethic was second to none. She was the hardest worker that I have ever known. She would get up in the morning and make breakfast and pack lunch for the four of us. She would then go teach school all day, come home, and make dinner for our family. Most nights, Dad would go back to the church for a meeting after our family dinner. So Mom was there to make sure we did our homework, took our baths, and said our prayers. On top of that, she did the house cleaning. I guess I should add, ironed Dad's shirts impeccably, washed our clothes, handled the yard until David and I got old enough to take over mowing the yard duties, and tended a garden in our backyard. Mom was amazing. I've got so many fond memories of Mom, but as I was thinking about her, I flashed back to high school when I was working at Kroger's. And some nights I worked late, and I would come home, and I would say I was too tired to do my homework before going to bed. Well, if I hadn't gotten my homework done before I went to bed, it was Mom waking me up extra early so I got my homework done before I went to school. And when I started preparing for college, it was Mom who helped with my college applications, proofed my essays, and researched scholarship opportunities. Mom taught us to work hard and to do our best. A family highlight was going to visit my grandmother Shuler at the Shuler family farm on Naked Creek. We especially enjoyed going on Thanksgiving when Mom's brothers, Charles, Freddie, and Jim, and sisters Eve and Beth, and their children, my cousins, would be there. Looking out into the congregation, I see Uncle Jim and Aunt Margaret, and that's my mom's baby brother, and she was so proud of you, Uncle Jim. And I see Drew and Caroline, and Bonnie and Andy, and Lisa, and we always just had the best time being at Grandmother Shuler's farm, and we so much appreciate you being here. Now I flash over here, I see Aunt Janet, my dad's sister, and Aaron, and sure means a lot for y'all to drive all the way from Indiana to be here today. Thank you so much. Our mom loved and was very proud of her 4 children, 9 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren. In recent years, she especially enjoyed visits from her great-grandchildren. Last week, I was looking at pictures from when Rylan and Abby and Delaney and Layton visited Mom and Dad during Camp G-Daddy. And my mom, the school teacher, being the school teacher, she would have every grandchild read a book. And then she'd ask them questions. And then she would usually have a little surprise and then something sweet to eat. Y'all remember those visits? Yeah. And she loved your visits. She was thrilled when Katie and Millie visited her on her 94th birthday, and she got to hold Billy. And although she never met him in person, she would ask me about Millie's little brother Carson, and made sure I sent her pictures of Carson that she could watch on her skylight. Over the past several years, I would call my mom daily, something that I learned from my wife Sharon, and she would always want me to update her on Jenny and Bobby and Katie and Jack. And she wanted to know what was going on in their families, and as y'all probably know, nothing made my mom happier than her family. She would still reminisce about Jenny's wedding at the Outer Banks by the pool and remind me that that was Dad's only wedding he ever did by a poolside. And she would reflect on Bobby and Brooke's wedding, and that was the last wedding my father assisted with. And then more recently, she made it to Katie and Cody's wedding, thanks to my brother David for driving her there. And she absolutely loved that Jack II officiated that wedding. It was one of her last road trips. The last 2 years have been rough for Mom. Ever since she had the back-to-back falls on December 23rd and Christmas Eve of 2021, she spent Christmas that year at Lynchburg General Hospital and eventually moved to Westminster, Canterbury, never returning to her beloved home on Powhatan Drive, which she had lived since the summer of 1968, where she and Dad had raised their 4 children. incredibly, I have never heard my mother complain. She always chose to be grateful for the many gifts that she had received. Her family, her friends, and a healthy, good, fulfilling, long life. I believe she was at peace and ready to reunite with Dad and to be with her Lord and Savior. I was blessed to visit Mom on her final day on earth. She was in Lynchburg General Hospital, and she was very weak. I came into the room and gave her a kiss on the forehead, and I said, "Hi, Mom." And she woke up briefly and said, "Hi, honey." She mostly slept while I sat beside her. She looked peaceful, and I wondered if she was dreaming and thinking about Dad. As I was preparing to leave, Ed Parrish, a longtime family friend who serves as a hospital chaplain there at Lynchburg General, he stopped by to check on Mom. And Ed and I talked while Mom rested and slept. And then just as I was getting ready to leave, Ed asked if he could say a prayer for Mom and our family. Ed was on the side of the bed with a hand on Mom's shoulder, and I was on the other side of the bed with a hand on Mom's other shoulder. After Ed said a beautiful prayer, I kissed my mom on her forehead, and I told her that I loved her. She magically opened her eyes and looked straight into my eyes and said, "I love you, Paul." Wrong son, but as Ed said, she knew her family was there. Yeah. A few hours later, the hospital called my brother David and shared that Mom had passed away peacefully in her sleep. A good life leaves behind the seeds that keep on growing. My mom's stories, her letters, her children and students, grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and her love of family, church, and community lives on in each of us. I give thanks for an incredible mother. Rest in peace, Mom. We love you.
My mother, Mary Frances Shuler Johnson, is the greatest Christian woman in my life. My mom was a wonderful wife to my father, the Reverend Dr. John Jack Johnson. Mary Frances was the loving and nurturing mother of their daughter, Anne, and their sons, Journey, Paul, and me, David. She was also a wonderful mother-in-law to Sharon and Betsy. She was a marvelous grandmother to Jenny, Bobby, Katie, Jack, Tim, Ben, Joe, Augie, and Patty. Mary was an adoring great-grandmother to Rylan, Delaney, Abby, Layton, Millie, and Carson. Mary Frances was the devoted daughter of Fred and Alma Shuler and the affectionate daughter-in-law of Ben and Virginia Johnson. Mary was the sweet sister of Charles, Eva, Beth, Freddie, and James. Mrs. Jack Johnson was the super sister-in-law to Margaret, Dot, Ben, Betty, and Janet. Mrs. Johnson was a kindergarten teacher and first grade teacher to thousands of children, mostly at New London Academy and other schools where she taught in Virginia. Mary Frances was the very supportive minister's wife at Disciples of Christ congregations in First Christian Church of Richlands, Diamond Springs Church, now Chalice Christian, Bethany Christian in Roanoke, and here at Timberlake Christian since her husband Jack founded this church in 1968 and retired in 1990. Since then, Mary continued to be a valued member until God took her to heaven on January 26th. Mary Frances Shuler Johnson, the greatest Christian lady in my life. And now to say a few words about his grandmother, here's my oldest son, Tim.
What I remember about Grandmother Johnson, I remember when I used to stay over at Granddaddy and Grandmother Johnson's house when I was younger, that I would sleep in Aunt Ann's room, and when I would wake up in the mornings, that Grandmother Johnson would try to help to teach me how to cook 3 different kinds of eggs. We would cook scrambled eggs with cheese on them first, and then fried eggs second, and then boiled eggs third. I also remember that for lunch or dinner, that Grandmother Johnson would often cook us stuff like cheeseburgers or sometimes salmon patties. And usually for lunch, she would cook for me and Granddaddy Johnson some Popeye spinach that we would get at the dollar store. I remember that Grandmother Johnson would always help to teach me how to bake a cake, like for my birthdays. I remember that while I was over at Granddaddy and Grandmother Johnson's house, that she would always have me drink a glass of milk with every meal. I remember that Grandmother Johnson would read to me the Letter People books when I was younger. I also remember that Grandmother Johnson would take me to places in her car, like to my college called Miller Mott Technical College. I also remember that she would drive me to my karate lessons at Super Kicks Karate. I remember that when Grandmother Johnson would take care of us at home, that I would help her with cleaning the kitchen and help her with vacuuming the stairs. I also remember that whenever she would buy us our favorite sodas that we liked to drink, she would always say, "Now try to make them last, don't drink it up." I also remember that she would often help me out with my homework for school or college. She would also always tell me to write down certain things so that I could remember them. I remember that whenever I would go to visit Grandmother Johnson at Westminster Canterbury, that I would always read to her Goosebumps books by R.L. Stein. That's all.
Thank you, Tim. You did a wonderful job. I learned a lot. That's great. So first of all, I want to say thank you all for being here today. It means the world to us. And thank you for your messages of love, your cards, your letters, and all your support. I want to thank Marcia Jones, Tom Cayley for singing for us today. She and I were in chorus together and in theater together at Brookville High School. And we were recently at a funeral and ran into each other after years. And I asked her if she would sing here today, and she went to New London Academy, where my mother taught, and she always talked about my mother smiling all the time. And maybe she'll tell more about that later. So my mom was at work and smiling. And I asked Marcia if she would sing here today. Then later, I read the 12 or 14 letters that my mother wrote to Tharp Funeral Home over the years, stating what she would like for her funeral. And one thing was, she wrote she would like Marcia to sing. And so I had already asked Marcia, and then I saw that my mother wanted Marcia. Marcia also sang at Mom and Dad's 50th wedding anniversary, for those of you who may remember that. And I want to thank Kathy Stinnett Truxell for reading today. We grew up together on Powhatan Drive. We were cheerleaders for the Richland Hills Tigers together. And we played Barbies. And she was at our house a lot, and we were the only two people in a class that Dad had for being baptized when we were 10. And so this church was not built yet in 1970. So we got baptized at Fairview Christian Church, your previous church, right? And so that meant a lot to be baptized with Kathy and with Dad there. And we had our classes for the baptismal classes at our house. So Kathy just walked down the street, and we had our classes about becoming a member of the church. I want to thank Reverend Ben, who's worked with me a lot over the past few weeks, and he's been extremely helpful. And one of my favorite memories of Reverend Ben is that when I was at Lynchburg General Hospital with Mom, and for some reason I was wearing an evening gown. I think I was dressed up for some reason. I had on a long red evening gown, and he came in and we sang Christmas carols for Mom. He was coming to do the Christmas caroling, but we couldn't have a lot of carolers come at once. So we stood on each side of Mom and sang her Christmas carols, and Mom moved her lips, or maybe actually sang to every single song and knew all the words. And that was just a few weeks ago at Christmas, right after Christmas. Mom has the same Paul on her casket as Dad did. She requested that, and it belongs to the church. It is a part of the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. Thank you for that. My mom was a very generous, thoughtful person. She was funny, usually without trying to be funny. She made us laugh. Mom never bragged about herself. She bragged about us, but she never bragged about herself. The obituary that my mother wrote about herself was about this long. The obituary that I instead wrote about her is this long. She would probably not be too happy about that, especially how much it cost to publish it. She was very good and frugal with her money. She knew how to handle her money very well. And so she had told me, I want my obituary to be shorter than Dad's obituary. But I guess I didn't listen. And I wrote a long one. And if you all want to Google it and read it, if you haven't, it mentions the Super Bowl. It mentions a kindergarten a student that she taught, who she let him throw the football in the class, and he became a Super Bowl champion later in life, Anthony Poindexter. And it was funny that it was published on Super Bowl Sunday and that she taught a Super Bowl champion. And I wrote about another student she had who became a doctor. And so I tried to tell a little bit more about her life than she did. She would have said it was too long, and she would have wanted it shorter, much shorter. But editing is not my forte. Mom sent some of the eulogy information to Ben, which I didn't know, but Ben told me about. And in addition to touting her laundry skills of washing and ironing Dad's white shirts, and yes, she did write that he never had to send a shirt to the laundry, she also wrote about making what she called roast beef on Sunday. And it was really sort of like a pot roast in the oven with celery, carrots, onions, potatoes. And she wrote to Ben all about that. And Ben Ben figured we'd probably talk about it, so we enjoyed having that on Sunday. When we'd get home from church, it would smell really great in the house, and it was like her own type of crock pot because she just used the oven for it to cook slowly, and it was delicious. And we ate it off of her formal wedding china, and the pattern is called Coronation because it was from the year that Queen Elizabeth II was coronated or crowned in 1953, the year that Mom and Dad met in early July and got married in late November, and as Journey said, on a snowy Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. And by the way, just to tell you that Reverend Oliver, his father, Raymond Oliver, and my dad, and another man named George Williams, were 3 best friends for years and years since they were kids. And that's why they know each other's families so well. So Mom touted her laundry skills to Ben, and that my dad's white shirts for church and work were always clean and pressed by her. She didn't mention that she worked all day, teaching 30 to 35 students, children, and even doing recess with them. And then she'd come home, and we never consult on what we write in our speeches, so we can all somewhat repeat each other. But as Mark or Journey said, then she would come home to cook us dinner, help us with homework at the dining room table, and then the next morning prepare the breakfasts and the lunches for us, and she would make 3 meals a day, often hamburger helper or shake and bake chicken in the electric skillet. We almost never ate in a fast food restaurant or really in any restaurant, very rarely. There was not much here in Campbell County at the time. Actually, Mom washed and ironed all of our clothes, cleaned the house, taught all year, including summer school, which I think Paul's going to mention summer school in a minute. And she also sold encyclopedia, so she found all kinds of ways to make money. And one time, it takes a long time to sell a set of encyclopedia because they're very expensive, and then you get a commission. And one time I wanted to take a law class, and it was rather expensive, and my mother gave me her whole commission that she had made off the encyclopedia that she had just sold. And that's how much she wanted me to take the class. To say she was hardworking is an understatement, and to say that she was generous is an understatement. She supported Dad's work a lot and worked full-time, except for a few years when she had 4 children. When Paul and I were young, she went right back to work, and she seemed to enjoy it. But she did all, or I'll say 99% of the housework, maybe 100%, cooking, cleaning, and she let her sons play sports and be in Boy Scouts and music and many activities. She let me, I think she just took us every day to all these activities. She let me be in ballet, tap, jazz, baton twirling, cheerleading, Richland Hills Tigers, piano, flute. She rented the flute, and she rented several of our instruments that we tried to play, just in case we weren't good at it, or maybe we would succeed at them. But she was very smart about renting things before she committed to them. She let me be a candy striper at Lynchburg General Hospital, where we wore striped pinafores and kind of looked like nurses, and helped out there. She let me do chorus and theater at Brookville High School, and even go to the Bandbox School of Modeling at Pittman Plaza. You may remember the plaza. So it's pretty, I was going to say the world's leading modeling school. I'm joking. But at least Lynchburg had one. And Mom let me go to it. She let me travel far and wide while still being very anxious about my going anywhere, even down the street. She let me work any jobs that I wanted to, from Tasty Freeze on Timberlake Road to being a TV reporter. She let us pursue all of our dreams while she did all the hard work. I think of that song, "You Are the Wind Beneath My Wings." She was the wind beneath Dad's wings and our wings. But maybe that was her dream, to help 5 other people succeed and have fun, and to have her thousands of students succeed and have fun. Mom never got to play much.
I doubt if she ever had a professional manicure or a massage in her life, or a vacation that was not part of a church convention or Mended Hearts convention. Fortunately, by having family in some different places, my parents, and because of the conventions, my parents got to visit a lot of different cities and several countries. And my happiest memory of my mom and dad was seeing them visit me in Paris twice, and the first time it was thanks to Timberlake Christian Church. I can't believe a church would give a minister a trip to Paris. I mean, that's amazing. And let his wife come too. And that was just the happiest time for us, and it was thanks to you and the previous members of Timberlake Christian Church. Now, when Mark talked about Mom waking us up to do our homework, she must have woken me up this morning because I wrote this morning. And she knows I've been planning a lot of the funeral, but I wrote this at the last minute. But I think it's what I would want to say. So my parents got to come to Paris twice, and another happy moment of my life and of my parents' life I will show you now. I should ask Ben and Ann Hicks, in a few minutes, are you ready with the video? Okay. All right, so this might wake everybody up. It'll be a real shocker to some. Okay. Another happiest moment of my life and my parents' life will be in this video. It took place right in this sanctuary right here in this church, Timberlake Christian Church. The occasion was Dad's retirement as senior pastor in 1990 after 22 years. You will see my two favorite Pauls in this video. Paul Johnson, my favorite singer, songwriter, musician, little bro, and lawyer. And Paul Childress, who we just lost in the past year. He was the chairman of the TCC congregation in 1990. I am forever grateful to Paul Childress and Charlie Flora and Gary and Wanda Garner and many others who helped my parents come to Paris or spend time in Paris on 2 occasions. This video will show you a very happy time for our family and for Timberlake Christian Church. If you see the photos on the backs of your bulletins of us in front of the church, this photo was taken right after we made this video. And we didn't know we were making a video. We didn't even know Timberlake had video back then or had cameras. So if you happen to have been the videographer at Dad's retirement event, please let me know because we're very grateful for this. Or if you know who was. In about 1 minute, and I hope it's okay with my little bro, you will hear Mom's favorite song. Of course, the song is not about her. It is about Dad. But she is mentioned in the song written by her youngest child, Paul. The lyrics say, quote, you married Mom 37 years ago. You didn't have much money, so you lived in a church. And they did live in Sunday school rooms in a church on the 2nd floor. They said when people would come to the church and need something, they would shout up to the window, and my parents would shout down and then go open the door. Now it will be 70 years ago this year. It is 70 years ago this year that Mom and Dad married. This song is also my favorite song in the world, and it's about Dad and Mom and our family and Timberlake Christian Church. And it tells the whole history of Dad and Mom's life. I couldn't believe when Paul told us that it took him only 10 minutes to write it, but that tells you how talented he is. So the song was about Dad, and it was called Dear Dad, or Front Page News of My Life. In 1922 and 23, when Mom was 93 and then on her 95th birthday, we sang it for her again. I added a final chorus using Paul's melody, and I wrote the last chorus about Mom, and she loved it and the whole song. How many of us in this room have had somebody write a song about them? So I figured that if anybody writes a nice song about you, you must be doing something right. Mom loved to write about her children in the local Lynchburg and Bedford papers and the JMU Alumni magazine. She tooted our horns, but she never bragged about her own accomplishments. But I know that Dad and we were her favorite accomplishments in her life. To borrow Paul's lyrics, and imitation is the finest form of flattery, so I'm saying Paul wrote beautiful lyrics. We were the front page news of her life and of Dad's life, but Mom, you and Dad were the front page news of our lives. I want to thank Craig for putting this video together in the middle of the night last night, just like me writing my speech this morning. And Craig got it over here to the church. I want to thank Ann Hicks, who I also went to high school with, who's back there on the audio board. And I want to thank Brooke Barlow for helping us make the bulletin together, and Ben for that. Thank you, Ben. Now the video from 1990. You may see people you know in the video. You may or may not recognize us. Then watch after the applause from the congregation. You will see Mom on her 95th birthday, August 12th, 2023. Sadly, it was her last birthday on earth. She looks happy and well pleased. And she enjoyed her carrot cake, which Dallas here made especially for her. Thank you to Paul Childress and his family. I know Paul is no longer with us in this room, but we can feel him. You'll see him standing right at that pulpit when we play the video. And thank you to Paul Johnson for this masterpiece and this beautiful, my favorite memory of my life.
Thank you very much for those very appropriate words, John. And they really were appropriate because he was talking about Jack and Mary Francis' talented and promising kids. They are talented, and they have promised to provide a performance for us this afternoon. We promised to keep the recording companies at bay while they do this. Kids, if you want to come up and they've got a treat for us.
Well, now you have a real surprise for you based on what you just said. My little brother Paul, who is a musician and who's now going to supplement his income by also being a lawyer, wrote this song about my dad, about what he's done for us and for other people. And it only took Paul 10 minutes to write this song. Seriously. But we four kids had never sung together before because 3/4 of us can't sing. Last Saturday, we got together for the first time since Christmas, and we practiced the song for a few minutes and recorded it. Dad's looking surprised. Recorded it in a recording studio in Richmond, and it sounded pretty good once they mix it and make your voice, they enhance your voice a lot. We thought about playing you the tape today and lip syncing it. But Dad has waited all his life to hear us sing together, so here's your chance. And so now I would like to present the siblings in their first and perhaps last live performance, singing Front Page News of My Life by Paul Johnson.
I was so glad one more chance to pray and realize you're the front page news of my life. You married Mom 37 years ago. So you lived in the church. Wake up every single morning.
Walk down the hall and go to work.
Your career took you to Jamaica to Richlands. From Norfolk Beach to Roanoke, PA. Found a home here with a new congregation. And in honor of you, we gather today.
In honor of you, we just wanted to say,
Dear Dad, now that you're retiring, I hope you'll take your own advice. Live every day as one more chance to pray and realize you're the front page news of my life. Oh, I know it wasn't easy.
sometimes we didn't have very much.
But you always took a little time and spent a part of each day with us. And though you had to work strange hours, so many people counted on you. Now it's your turn to take a break.
Our turn to show you what we can.
Dear Dad, now that you're retiring, I hope you take your own advice. Live every day as one more chance to pray and realize the front page news of my life. Dear Dad, now that you're retiring, I hope you take your own advice. Live every day as one more chance to pray and realize. Realize.
Front page news of my life.
You're the front page news of our lives. You're the front page news of our lives.
Dear Mom, now you're so inspiring. I hope you'll take dear Dad's advice. Everybody gather now. Live every day as one more chance to pray and realize you're beautiful. You're the front page news of our lives. You're the front page news of our lives. One more time. You're the front page news of our lives. Love you. All right. Oh, yeah. Hey. All right. Good job, man.
Forgot to add just one thing. I want to thank everybody who visited Mom and Dad, and I want to mention every person's name, but I know that I would leave many people out. But the beautiful people who brought her communion from this church, Timberlake Christian Church, and all the wonderful friends and family who came to visit, it meant the world to her, and it meant the world to me and to us. Thank you.
I just have two things about Mom I would like to relay, and they're kind of the same theme. Who with us today is either a teacher or a retired teacher or was a teacher at some time? Excellent. Yes, look around you. We got a lot of teachers among us. Mom made being a teacher look easy. When I was young and Mom taught summer school, I was too young to leave at home. I was the youngest of the four. She would take me with her when she would teach summer school. She'd put me in the back of the classroom, and I would get the advantage of attending classes that were well ahead of me. But the thing that amazed me, even as I think back on it, is how she was able to bring the best out of her students. She made teaching look easy. I just assumed that students were a piece of cake, right? I would go and I'd be like, wow, these students are fantastic. I didn't think that it had anything to do with my mom. I thought, wow, she's got a great class, right? But my mom made it look easy. And she did it while dealing with me, who probably wasn't the best student in her classroom, okay? That's my first memory. Later on, when she was just down the road here at New London Academy, raise your hand if you know New London Academy. You've heard the name, right? I grew up thinking it was a private school, because who had ever heard of a public school called New London Academy? But it is, in fact, a public school. And as everyone has mentioned, she was there for 26 years. She used to take me at Halloween. The other thing I didn't realize about teachers is how much overtime they put in. They teach during the day, but then they have to go back in the evening for all these events, parent-teacher conferences, and any kind of celebration that takes place at the school. They have to take their turn and be part of that event. And Mom did it with such grace. She never complained about it. And looking back, I'm like, wow, she gave up her evenings after teaching all day. And let me give you an example. Every Halloween, New London Academy would have this big Halloween festival. And Mom's specialty at the festival was she did what was called the wishing well. And if you've been in a school cafeteria, once you finish with your food, you take it over to a place where you leave your dishes and someone is in the dish room and they take them and they wash them. She would set up that dish room as her wishing well, and the students would line up with a bucket on a pole, and you would put the pole over. She would turn it into like a little wishing well, and you put it over, and you wouldn't even know it was my mom. Only I knew it was my mom. That's how humble she was. She didn't need credit, but you'd put it over, and you'd wish for a toy or a treat, okay? And my mom would make sure you got the toy or treat. And so the wishing well, your wish came true as a result of my mom. And my friends and I would go through the line multiple times. You had to stand in line, but there was no rule that you couldn't do it again. So we'd do other things at the event, but we'd always come back because it was a sure bet. All the other things you had to win. You had to do something to win a prize. With the wishing well, all you have to do is show up, stand in line, and wish for a toy or a treat, and guess what? You got it. That was my mom.
For a time of sharing from the congregation. So if there's anyone who would like to share a memory about Mary Frances, now is the time.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Stuckey, and I met Reverend Johnson and Mrs. Johnson because I delivered Meals on Wheels to them. And we became instant friends. We had a lot in common. Mrs. Johnson and I shared the same birthday month. We were retired kindergarten teachers, she at New London, as you know, and I was at Tomahawk in Campbell County. We love sharing stories about our experiences as a teacher and also sharing stories about our students. My daughter-in-law, Jennifer Stuckey, was one of her former students at New London. And she has a successful teaching career. She's the head of the English department at Brookville High School. We shared stories about our kids, our grandkids. My granddaughter Abby would often go with me to deliver the meals when she had a day off from school, and she loved being there. She would sing for them. One of her favorites, Mrs. Johnson, always wanted her to sing the 12 Days of Christmas. Mrs. Johnson was always grateful and thankful no matter what I did for her. It didn't matter if I took a bag of tomatoes from the garden, if I brought her some cucumber and onions and vinegar, if I cooked her squash and zucchini, it didn't matter. She was always so grateful. And I received a thank you note for every one of those things, even a bag of tomatoes. I'd bring her daffodils from my yard in the spring. I bring her a little Christmas tree for the living room at Christmas. and she always, always wrote me a thank you note. I visited her many times besides the Meals on Wheels delivery days, even when I had to stop delivering Meals on Wheels after 12 years because of my health issues. It was an honor and a privilege for me to know Reverend and Mrs. Johnson. They were truly God's servants here on earth and now have earned their special place in heaven. Well done, you good and faithful servants. Well done.
Thank you.
This may not work. Okay. I'm not good at speaking, so here goes. I graduated from Longwood years ago, but Mary Frances found out that I did library science. My first substitution job was at, well, it's Brookville Elementary School. The librarian there, Ms. Dinwiddie, had to have surgery for about a month after school started. So I've always told Mary Frances that she got me my first job, and it was wonderful because I loved books and I loved the children. But once she found out, she went right into, I know somebody that can fill this, and I was very nervous about the job, but Mary Frances said I could do it, so I did my best.
You guys, my Mary Frances and Jack Johnson would come to my dad's and mom's home in the beginning when they were thinking about designing the building and stuff. And my dad had he seemed to always disagree with the budget. He definitely told his opinion. And anyway, my mom would be so embarrassed, and she would like, Bernard, you need to calm down. But Mary Frances, all she would say is, now Bernard. And my dad would settle down, and my mom was so thankful for Mary Frances because she is like, yes, you know, you would not believe how much my mom loved Mary Frances for that reason. So they were pillars in this church for sure. We will always love them and remember them forever. I think Ann mentioned that we did grow up across the street from each other, so we ran around Powhatan Drive, and there's a few things I remember about Mary Frances. She always, when you're a kid, you kind of know really whether somebody's truly interested in you or not. And even as a kid, you know, I could tell that she was. And I realize now later, because she did always smile, and sometimes you would tell her something, and she'd say, oh, and she'd kind of laugh. And later you realize it was probably something you misconstrued happened at your house, and she was like, oh, you probably shouldn't be saying that. But she would just smile, and she'd say, oh, really? And she, you know, just to echo what, you know, her family has said and other people have said, her memory was just phenomenal. And she did remember everyone in your family. You know, she would ask me, she had not seen my brother or my sister. You know, she knew my grandparents, all my kids. But just, I've never seen anybody who could do that. And truly, not just a memory of who someone's name was, but of that person. And it's also nice to think that she is now with Jack, because her devotion to him was just unmatched. So, love to you all and love to them.
Hi, I'm Alton Perlman. I've been a longtime friend with Paul, and I just wanted to share my appreciation for Reverend and Mrs. Johnson. She would give us
their basement every day after school to play in a band. Paul and I and this guy right here, Ed, would make a racket 3 or 4 days a week, every afternoon. And I could always remember going in the side door and she's, Alton, so good to see you. Come on in. And she would holler down the stairs, Paul, Alton's here. And for her to say it was so good to see us, knowing that she had 2 or 3 hours of racket ahead of her, was amazing. And she really did. She cared so much for the children. One of the things I used to laugh, and Ed and I used to get such a kick. Paul was a couple of months older, so he was driving first, and we'd be in the family AMC Hornet, which I think had been handed down through all the children. And we'd be out running around in the car, and we'd need something at Paul's house, and we'd fly back to his house. We'd run down to the basement, come back out to the driveway, and Mrs. Johnson had a bucket of water and her dish rag and a bottle of dish detergent washing Paul's car. Suds all over it. We're like, gotta go, see you, thanks, Mom. Pull out, suds all over the car. But just the fact that they made their house so warm and welcoming to us, I always appreciated that so much.
All right, so I'm Ben, David's son, and Mary Frances, had a lot of involvement in our growing up, as Tim mentioned, with all the time. I had all the same experiences as him, the great experience. But when I think about my early childhood, and I think about one of my first memories of her, and it just expresses her character, but it was a little traumatic as a kid. But anyway, I had some ailment. I can't even remember what it was. But the doctor told me, my parents, you have to take this medicine at a certain time or whatever. As a kid, I hated taking medicine. I was very sensitive to tastes, flavors. So I hated, it had to be forced upon me. And I think it was put on our school nurse to administer it. And I wouldn't listen to her, I guess. But I just remember one day getting called to the nurse's office. And when I got there, it wasn't just a nurse. Mary Frances was there. And I wasn't expecting this, and she forcibly held me down and injected medicine into my mouth, imagine a dog, that's at the vet, is what I remember it being like, because I just, I was not, giving up easy. I was probably 6 or 7, so she could hold me down, but yeah, that's just, she made your life, her business, and she would, if something needed to be done for your benefit, she was there to make sure it happened, whether, you agreed or not. So I just wanted to share that one, because, yeah.
I'm Ben's Aunt Susan, and Tim's Aunt Susan, and Joseph's Aunt Susan. Ben, I think what you had was streptococcus. I remember hearing the story, not of that, but of the fact your grandparents were very worried about you because the streptococcus had gone through your system and was affecting your kidneys. It was pretty serious. So I'm so grateful to know that your grandmother Johnson showed up. She was worried about you. And I just wanted to say I have many good, cherished memories of Mrs. Johnson. I always respected her. And as everybody here has said, she was always interested in your life and what was going on with you. She was very humble and didn't speak a lot of herself. And when my mother was ill during her final 2 years, Mrs. Johnson was also having her own health issues at home. But she would call my mother faithfully every 2 or 3 days and ask how she was doing. And I think my mother looked forward to those phone calls. And Mrs. Johnson would always have a positive message for her, even though they were both going through some serious health issues. Mrs. Johnson would check on people and act like she was doing fine. So I always remember that and appreciated it, and I know my mother looked forward to hearing from her, and it kept her spirits up. So I'll always remember Mrs. Johnson and Reverend Dr. Johnson. And of course, their children have been a big part of our lives, and their grandchildren that we know. All right, thank you.
I haven't been at this church but about 8 or 9 years. So Mary Frances was already a homebound person when I came here, and so I never knew her as an active member of this church. But I visited her and took her communion, and every time that I saw her, she was asking about everyone here, the other homebound members, what was going on in everybody's life. And it wasn't just curiosity. She really, really cared. My mom had come to live with me, and she was older and semi-homebound at the time, too. And so Mary Frances never even met my mom. But she constantly was asking me how my mom was doing and what was going on with my mom. And she didn't even know her, but she knew that my mom was important to me. And so she really genuinely cared about people.
My name's Ken Beecraft, and I just have been so blessed to have the Johnsons as part of our family friends. Mr. and Miss Johnson were so influential in my life. I can't begin to talk about so many times how they influenced me. I know one job interview as assistant county administrator for Campbell County I was so nervous at. And the county administrator said, well, Mr. Johnson, Jack Johnson, you know him. He speaks so highly of you. And I'm like, I got it now. I'm good. So there's just been, Mark was Kirk's age. My older brother, David, and I are the same age. And my younger brother, Chris, and Paul were within a year. So it's just been wonderful. I will share one funny story that I never will forget. Mark and I had been out during, I think, maybe I was 17, he was 18 or sometime in there, and we had been to the pizza shop. We'd made our circuit all around. And when I pulled up in front of their house on Powhatan, as y'all have heard, the front porch light was on. And as I just pulled up front, and as Mark was going through the front yard, I said something colorful. And about that time after that, I heard Mr. Johnson saying, Ken? He said, so good to see you. And I said, well, that's great. I bet Miss Johnson's standing there right there beside him. So I learned a valuable lesson that day to kind of know your surroundings before you run your mouth. So, but it's been wonderful.
I am Elizabeth Pankey, and I was blessed not with a thank you note, but a long conversation. Mary Frances Johnson called me, and we had never met. I had mailed her a history of Euclid Christian Church. We had quite a chapter and verse on that, and she had asked for it I was at Euclid, and I made a copy, and I put it in the mail, and she stayed up all night long to read it. She wanted to know all about it, and I think we talked about every page. And I have the memory of my last visit with Mary Frances on the Sunday before her death. And she was in the hospital, and I went in, and I spoke to her, and she opened her eyes, and she was fully and completely Mary Frances Johnson, with all her kindness, her gentleness, her interest in me, and I will carry that with me forever.
Hi, I'm Rylan, and I just wanted to share one of my favorite memories of my grandma Johnson was a couple months ago, coming back from visiting Virginia Tech, and got to visit at Westminster Canterbury, and brought my guitar with me and got to play some songs, sing with my sister. It was just a great memory, and I just wanted to share that with you all.
You talked about it.
I love my mother-in-law. She was great. But when Journey and I first got married,
you're trying to figure out what the husband does and what the wife does. And so I said one day, well, Journey, my oil needs to be changed in my car. And he says, well, okay. I said, well, my dad always did that. And he goes, well, my mom always did it. That was Mary Frances.
I just want to say Alton made me think of something about my mom. She was like a character out of a movie that she could pop up anywhere. Okay, she could be in the nurse's office holding you down, right? And she could be out there washing Paul's car before you all got back upstairs. One time I was leaving on a road trip, and I stopped at the gas station on Timberlake Road, which is where the Harley-Davidson place is now. And I was getting my gas, and then I saw somebody, I didn't know who, but I could just tell somebody was washing my windows and my headlights. And I thought, I didn't know they had that service here. And I looked, and it was my mother. She had followed me to the gas station because she thought my windshield and my headlights weren't clean enough. So she can pop up just anywhere. And so maybe even in the afterlife, she'll pop up and help us with different things. But I wanted to add, the reason I asked for Morning Has Broken, besides the fact that we sang it in middle school, the Cat Stevens version, is my mother got up so early every morning to work and to do everything at 4 or 5 in the morning. And she loved gardens and everything that's mentioned in that song. So I appreciate all of you all, Ed, Marcia, Matt, everybody doing the song. And then she could pop up in the morning, pop up at night. As you said, Miss Pankey, stay up all night reading about Euclid Christian Church. She could just go nonstop and pop up anywhere. So thank you, Mom.
Please stand as you are able. We'll sing together. In the bulb there is a flower.
Something God